welcome to California Haunt. This episode of California Haunts Radio is kind of different because we're doing it from Zoom tonight. So I have a producer, Hui Ann's working for me as producer tonight. And because I'm a Zoom virgin, I'm not used to doing multiple tasks on Zoom. Anyway, I welcome you guys. We are the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team out of Sacramento. We are 35 strong up and down the state of California, Oregon, Washington, and we have people in Hawaii. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host tonight, and I am also the owner of the team. And tonight, I got a great guest for you guys. And what a lot of you guys don't know is I'm actually a journalist, and I was on the crime beat for 6 years, so this gentleman has piqued my interest. So his name is Peter Lance, and he has a story to tell because he's also an investigative journalist. So let's, Peter, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for having me on. I live on the West Coast. I live in Santa Barbara, so I'm haunting Santa Barbara on a regular basis. So to be on California Haunts is like very auspicious.
I want to live in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, well, when you move here, they say welcome to paradise, and there's good reason for that. But anyway, let's just talk, and by the way, I lost my little lower third there. I don't know if it just.
No, you're okay. I see you.
You're fine.
I mean, I'm not seeing peterlance.com, my website.
I see it right there. Sam pointing at it.
We can see it. We can see it. That's all that matters.
Okay.
Yeah,
it comes on when I talk. Is that how it works?
It's there. It's there all the time.
Oh, I see.
It's
Okay.
there all the time.
Okay, great. That's because I'd like people to know, just getting off the bat, I'm shamelessly, this is the reason I'm on this program. I wrote this book called Homicide at Rough Point. It's glaring. It's a glaring book, and it's glaring right now on the camera. Let me see if I can change the light a little bit so it's not to mess it up so much. Hold on one second. Put a little bit of a more mysterious look to the room. Oh, it's still the same. Okay. But you've seen.
That's okay. You know what? When I do the editing on this, I will add I will do a overlay.
But speaking of haunting, I guess this is appropriate. What this is on a side angle. Maybe if I hold up the trade paperback, it'll look a little. No, it's the same thing. Oh,
don't worry about it. I'll fix it.
All right. I have one last shot I'm going to try here. I'm going to turn the light off. It's a little bit better. Okay, now it's not. But I'm more.
I'll fix it. Don't worry about
it. I like the dark look here for the haunting. The bottom line is that the cover has this mysterious gate, a massive gate on an estate in Newport, Rhode Island, which is where I grew up. And behind that estate in 1966 lived the wealthiest woman in America, Doris Duke, the heir to American Tobacco, Alcoa Aluminum, and Duke Power, which is now called Duke Energy. Fabulously wealthy billionairess, known for her violent temper, very vindictive, very jealous. In 1966, I was a young cub reporter for the local paper, the Newport Daily News, and 8 months earlier, she had crushed to death under the wheels of a 2-ton station wagon. I'll try and talk to the camera if I can. I'm going to try and get up a little bit here. Okay. So she had crushed to death her longtime designer companion, Eduardo Torella, happened to be a gay man, a war hero, a Renaissance man, incredible guy. Then literally minutes after he told her he was leaving her, he told her his Hollywood career was amping up. He was designing movies with Taylor and Burton, and his life, and his partner, Edmund Carroll, was an important sculptor on the West Coast. So he tells Doris Duke he's leaving. They have a big fight, and then minutes later, she crushes him to death. The local cops wrote it off in 96 hours, called it an accident, and she started giving tens of thousands of dollars to the city of Newport. My whole life, I was haunted by this story, try to get to the truth. And like Charlotte, I'm a reporter, and over the years, I vowed someday I'm going to do the Doris Duke story, and I started in 2018. And it took me 2 years. I proved she committed murder. There's this piece in Vanity Fair last August. I had an 8,000 word piece. And then I said, why not write a book in 6 months? Oh, okay. And I did. And now the book is out. So anyway, the book is out. There's an Audible, a Kindle, a trade paper, and a hardcover. I recommend the hardcover. And that's enough plug for me now.
Yeah, you're perfect. Actually, look straight. Okay, look up.
Look straight.
No, turn around. Turn your face to the
There we go.
Okay, that's where you want to be looking at. That's what you.
It seems like, you know what? Can I say one thing? I think it's, wait, well, let me just say one thing. I think it's because it's picking up my, it's picking up the, let me just see if I do
perfect where it is right now. Just face.
Oh,
No, no.
yeah, it's better with the other camera, isn't it? You're right. It's more flattering with that camera.
Okay, now look straight.
Good man with multiple cameras.
Turn
I'm
your
impressed.
face to the right a bit. Turn your face to your left a bit. That's it.
No, I mean, I can see it. I see where it is now. You see my little Emmy Awards up there in the corner?
I do.
It's another shameless act of self-promotion on my part. But anyway, okay, so I feel good. Can I just lean back in my chair, drink?
Go for it. Just relax and let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. But I could take my glasses off because I don't think I have to read anything. So
that's how you want to do it. I know there's a couple of cases I'm thinking about doing that with as well. So how did you, obviously you're a journalist, so how did you go about doing the research on it and everything?
Well, interestingly, there's a Facebook group, and I think we're on Facebook tonight, or we're going to be at some point.
Yeah, we're on Facebook tonight right now.
Good. So there was a Facebook group, it still is a really passionate group in Newport called If You Grew Up in Newport, Rhode Island, Share Some Memories. And there's like 10,500 members of this group, and they're very people that grew up there or lived there. There was a big Navy base, so many people over the years moved in and out of Newport, which is one of the most amazing little towns on earth. And I'm not just saying that because I'm from there, it really is. And so what happened was about 4 times a year, Charlotte and Andrea and whoever else decides to join, and Hui, about 4 times a year, somebody would post a crash photo of the death scene of where this happened. This station wagon crashed against a tree across from her estate. And people would come out of the woodwork with rumors. Oh, she got away with murder. She bought off the police chief. He bought an island in Italy. He lives near Nixon in Key Biscayne, Florida. You know, just a million rumors. And then she was very stingy, but she started shelling money out to the town. And she actually restored 70 colonial buildings in Newport, colonial era buildings that helped to resuscitate Newport as a tourist town after President Nixon mercilessly closed much of the Navy base in 1973. The town was on the verge of bankruptcy. So I call this a murderous quid pro quo. In other words, she gets away with murder, in turn, she saves the town economically. That's the essence of it. And so I always wanted to do it. And then when Trump made his famous statement, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any votes. Remember that? That was in 2016. One day I had just finished adapting my middle career was in Hollywood, and I worked on a lot of cop shows, Miami Vice, Crime Story, Jag, Wise Guy, you know, and so I basically returned to journalism after 9/11. I wrote 4 really gnarly books for HarperCollins on counterterrorism and organized crime. So I had the skill, you know, finally I had the chops to be able to go back and do a story like this. I start with the Facebook group, and you wouldn't believe it, Charlotte, the people came out of the woodwork. I was there that night, or I remember I was 9 years old. It happened at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was still light out in October of 1966. And I began to work the people. Then I found ex-cops who had worked the scene, and they all told me what they knew. They knew fragments of the story. And then I finally located the son of the photographer that took these amazing photos. And his name was Ed Quigley, and he worked at the Daily News when I was there. This was the job that got him the staff job in the Daily News. He lived nearby, and he got there within minutes. He took these amazing shots, and his photographs helped me solve the crime.
Wow.
Yeah. So his stepson, John Quigley, is in Newport right now with his wife, Jane McGuire. They always go up to celebrate St. Patty's Day and Newport, and they are amazing people. So but you know, part of the story and part of the mystery here, which makes it a haunting story, to use, if I can use coin a phrase, a haunting story. What makes it really fascinating is that Doris Duke, with this billionaires, and by the way, in 1966, you know how wealthy she was? She was making $1 million a week in interest on her fortune. She could just stand in the corner of a room and not even move for a week, and she'd be $1 million richer. $1 million a week in interest. So she had this battery of like lawyers and private investigators and minions and PR guys, and they would go in and sanitize the record, clean up the record of her troubled life. So, for example, the day after this happened, my paper to be, the Newport Daily News, the one I used to throw on porches when I was 10 years old, I delivered it first and then I wrote for it. That paper had an incredible shot underneath the wagon as it was crashed against the tree, so you could see the rear axle, and there was a strange substance on the ground, which I later confirmed was blood. It was Torella's blood. And when I went to Newport for my first trip, I went to the archive of the Newport Daily News at the Historical Society, and so they had all of the negatives of the Daily News for years lined up in these beautiful boxes, and every photo that appeared in the Daily News for the certain number of years of the archive would be in a slot in the box in chronological order of where it appeared in the paper. So if it was page 1, you could just find the negative and get it reproduced. Well, all the negatives for I went back a week before and a week after, all the negatives for that week, which would have been, or that day, October 8th, 1966, all of them were there except that picture had been selectively the negative removed. All right. And we later found out why, because it shows essentially blood. So when I got to John Quigley, the grandson who lives on Long Island with his wife, Jane, I said, John, please tell me, do you have any of Ed's photos? Do you have any negatives or anything? And he goes, Peter, I have a basement full of them. I'm like, what? Dude, you got to get down there, man. You got to work. See, help me out here. And he and Jane lovingly went down there for weeks and weeks. And she actually found a print of the shot I was looking for, not even a negative. She found that it had been printed and preserved. It looked great. And so that was when Vanity Fair ran the story last July, August issue. And the story is the same as the title of the book, Homicide at Rough Point. Okay, that's the title of the book, and that was the Vanity Fair piece. And now it looks a little easier. Let's glare like that.
There you go. Yeah.
That's the gate. That's the gate which she crushed. She blew through that gate. They were leaving the estate. Eduardo got out of the car to open the gate. She slid behind the wheel, threw it into gear, removed the parking brake, unleashed the parking brake, and leaving like gouges in the gravel, and then hit him, blew through these gates, damaged the gates. And then I'll get a little bit later in the program, I'll tell you how I know it was murder. But so John Quigley's stepdad, he didn't take this photo. This is taken by another man named Jerry Taylor the next morning. But if you could see the cover and you go to peterlance.com, my website, you'll see everything you need, like close-ups of everything. And if you obviously order the book, you'll see that the gates were mangled. They were 15 feet high, 7 feet wide. And they had these baluster rungs. They were an inch thick of like wrought iron, really heavy gates. And when this 2-ton wagon blew through the gates, basically 7 of these rungs were broken off. And the gates were bent. And then so they blew out like that. And then the next day they were pushed back in, and that's when that photo was taken. But the Quigleys, in one of the photos they found, there was a heavy-set man to the right of the gates, working the crime scene, essentially, right? A few minutes after it happened. His name was Fred Newton, and I had done an article on Fred Newton the next year when I worked there as a cub reporter. He used to train all the recruits. And I went, wait a minute, is that Fred Newton? They go, yeah, it's, and he had passed away, but he ultimately became chief of the department. And I discovered through the first young cop on the scene that Fred Newton had solved the crime, but he was prevented from telling the truth because the corrupt police chief cut a deal with Doris that allowed her to get away with murder.
So how did you, when you started to gather all this information, you had to deal with the police at some point, right?
I had to deal with the contemporary police, but this is 50. When I was starting the investigation, it was 52 years after the fact. Now it's 54. And the current police chief in Newport, a guy named Silva, S-I-L-V-A, was completely uncooperative. He didn't want to know about this. And one of the best biographers of Doris Duke is called Her name is Stephanie Mansfield. She used to be a reporter for the Washington Post. And there are many biographies. I read every biography there was. I read virtually every article ever written about Doris Duke as I, researched the book. The book has 60 pages of endnote annotations. It's incredibly well documented, if I do say so. And anyway, Stephanie Mansfield wrote a letter to Torella's sister, Anita, who's since passed away, in 1990. Her book came out in 92. She said, I've been trying to find the police report, but it's missing from the department. Do you have it? Of course, Anita didn't have it. And so that's some evidence that as early as 1990, this famous murder, which you'd think the cops would have held on to this case, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Unless there had been foul play on their part. And anyway, the current chief, Chief Silva, I want to say Gary Silva, I think that's his name. Anyway, he was uncooperative, let's put it like that. And there are other aspects. I mean, I could go on for 5 minutes about just how I found the police report, because I found it eventually. And the police report dovetailed 100% with, just not 100%, but 95% with what I had already concluded by talking to 1 million witnesses and, going through 10,000 pages of annotation. When I say 1 million, I mean, probably almost 100 source witnesses are in the book, and about 10,000 pages of documentation, including over 1,000 pages from the Rubenstein Library at Duke University, where all of Doris's papers are kept. And that's another way I was able to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
So what you're saying, after finding that police report, is they literally had all the evidence in front of them, and I guess she bought him off, or however you want to say it, right?
Well, so let me put it in perspective. The police chief at the time, Newport's a very Irish town, although it was founded on the scourge of slavery, the triangle trade of molasses, slaves, and rum. Newport was one of the wealthiest towns prior to the Revolution, American Revolution, and there's been a major Black community in Newport ever since, the descendants of slaves. And I'll get to that in a little bit, because I wrote a series, an expose, my first real journalism in 1968. In the second year I was at the Daily News, I wrote a series called Newport's Backyard about this essentially a ghetto in the town where Black people were living in incredible slum conditions, and the city had done nothing to enforce the housing code to ensure that the houses were safe and habitable. And I did that series, name the names of slumlords, and it really shook up the town. They immediately set up an escrow fund so that the residents of the houses could put their rent money in escrow at City Hall until the slumlords fixed them up. And then they created a housing church community housing corporation, similar to what Jimmy Carter does with Habitat to Humanity. And they began building houses for the people in the neighborhood who were able to get them at no interest. And then with pride of ownership, fix them up. And many of the people to this day live in those houses. And it's a much better neighborhood now. It's a beautiful neighborhood. And Newport has a rich African-American heritage. But the chief was Italian in a town that was essentially dominated by the Irish at the time. But his name was Joseph Radice, R-A-D-I-C-E. And he was a bulldog. He'd been on the job for 41 years, started as a patrolman. And he ran that department with an iron hand. In fact, Bill Watterson, one of the officers I interviewed, was a retired detective inspector. I said, Bill, do you have any doubts that Radice covered this up? And he said, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But Peter, you have to understand, this guy was so powerful that if you bucked him in any way, he just ripped the badge off your chest and you were gone. That's the way he ran the department. So it was Radice conspiring with other high-level members of the department with Duke's lawyers that I proved entered into a conspiracy to let her off the hook. And I can talk about how I proved that in addition to proving the murder. But anyway.
What was the motive for her to kill him?
Well, I believe ultimately the motive was jealousy that he was leaving her. But in fact, after I wrote the article in Vanity Fair, And you can't get into a person's head for sure, and
Right.
far be it from me to get into Doris Duke's head. But I put together a pretty good profile based on all the books of her, and she was a notorious Scorpio. She was born on November 22nd, very jealous. She had stabbed her common law husband, Joseph Armand Castro, who was a Mexican-American, brilliant jazz musician and band leader, pianist. She'd stabbed him with a butcher knife, 150 stitches in 1963, 3 years earlier, because she was playing, she loved jazz and she fancied herself a performer. And she was playing at their estate in Los Angeles, one of her 4 major estates, and he made some crack about her piano playing. And there was a lot of booze and barbs involved in their relationship. They had this roller coaster trajectory for like almost 10 years. And she just grabbed a butcher knife and slashed his arm, 150 stitches. And she got away with that one. She basically, he sued her. She threw him out of the house they were living in called Falcon Lair, which is the old Rudolph Valentino estate in Bel Air. And she threw him out on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1964. The stabbing happened in 63, earlier in the year. And he sued her for assault and battery, $150,000 in damages. He wanted $5,000 a month alimony, and he wanted to have, or alimony, essentially spousal support. And then he also wanted the common law marriage affirmed because he alleged that they had actually had gone through wedding ceremonies twice over the time. And so what she did through her lawyers, he happened to be in Hawaii at the time, she had him kidnapped. He was literally shanghaied in Hawaii, off the streets, and taken to her estate, Shangri-La, which is this gorgeous, now Islamic themed estate in Diamond Head and Honolulu. And they held him incommunicado, Charlotte, for like several days. And they worked on him and he finally agreed to renounce his lawyer in LA and betray his lawyer, drop the suits. And she promised him that she was going to put him in the will. She set up a recording company for him, Clover Records, and did various other things to placate him. So he came back and the lawsuits were dropped. But that's the kind of tactic she used. Wow. I mean, imagine kidnapping somebody off the streets. And the lawyer in LA was an ex-FBI agent named Hughes. And he was so audacious or dumb, depending on how you look at it, that he typed the letter that was supposed to be from Joe to renouncing to his lawyer in LA, a guy named Brown, a good lawyer. The letter was typed on the same typewriter that Hughes used for his legal pleadings with respect to lawyer Brown. So, I mean, it didn't even either occur to him to hide the fact that he was conspiring. And by the way, I have a law degree, if you don't hold that against me, and it's absolutely against the canon of ethics in any state to communicate, let alone kidnap, somebody who's represented by counsel. That's like really against the rules. That's like a cardinal rule. You don't do that. And they did it. So she knew she could get away with that. And she also later, in various documents that I uncovered, she actually encouraged him. One of these documents was the affidavit of lawyer Brown, who sued, basically civilly to, recover some of what he felt he had lost in the representation of Joe. And he says in the sworn deposition transcript that I read that, Castro was basically cheated, because in the end he got nothing. He was just, and he finished out his career at the Tropicana in Las Vegas. He was a renowned band leader. And he married a beautiful young singer named Loretta Haddad. So he got his revenge. He was, I think, 13 years younger than Doris, but she was that kind of jealous. And when Eduardo, he was gay, and as far as I could tell, he wasn't bisexual. Nor, even if he was bisexual, I don't believe, knowing what I know about him, and I've become kind of an expert in Eduardo, who is an amazing guy, that he would have allowed himself to have sex with Doris, because one of two things would have happened. Either he would have pleased her and she'd never let him go, or he would have disappointed her, at which point he would have been gone too soon. And so he wanted to extricate himself from her after he had done all this amazing work for her and was severely underpaid. And however, after I wrote the article in Vanity Fair, I got this email from an individual named, I won't give you his name right now, but he said, Peter, I was her lover after she killed that guy. Would you like to talk? And I said, yeah, I'd like to talk. And he was a big game hunter, this amazing guy, former gunner in the RAF during World War II, the Royal Air Force. He was Irish, very credible guy. I checked him out. He's 90 years old. He had the constitution of a 60-year-old. He sounded great on the phone. He had a steel trap mind. His memory was precise. And he basically said that every year from June till October during the monsoon season in the Himalayas and other places where he would hunt tiger and things like that, he would take the time off, 5 months off every year, okay, and play. So he happened to be in Hawaii in 67, like this is like maybe 10 months after she killed Eduardo. And Doris met him at a party. They went home that night. They were inseparable for the next 5 months. And during that time, he got more and more wary of her. And he said she was incredibly jealous, incredibly vindictive. I just wanted to get away from her. Mm-hmm. And he said, I told her I was leaving. And she said, if you walk out that door, don't come back. And he said to me, and I thought to myself, great, that's okay with me. And then I said, so did she ever mention Eduardo? And he said, oh, yeah. She told me she killed him. And I said, what? And so this is what he told me. He said that apparently in pillow talk one night, they were, discussing what happened. And Doris said to him, he said, I'll never forget her words. And I said, what did she say? She said, he got what was coming to him. Nobody 2 times me. Nobody 2 times me. Like, what does that mean? Well, his partner, Edmund Cara, Doris not only had met him because they had an incredible house in Laurel Canyon, he and Edmund, but they had another house up in Big Sur in Northern California, closer to where you are, I reckon. And so Edmund was a sculptor of natural wood. In fact, he sculpted the nude bust of Liz Taylor in this famous film, The Sandpiper, that was shot in 1964 in Big Sur, which Eduardo not only designed Liz's a beach house in the film, but he also had a cameo role in the film, and Edmund Cara did this bust. So basically, Doris had been up there. She'd met Edmund. She'd even hired Edmund to do some design work for her in LA. So she couldn't have been jealous of Edmund. And by that point, Edmund and Eduardo were late, kind of in their relationship, and they were more friends than anything else. You know what I mean? They were both in their late 30s, early 40s, but. And I can't say for sure, but there was a very beautiful young man that was a painter that Eduardo was kind of smitten with at the time. And I interviewed him. He's still alive. And he told me that he spent a weekend with Edmund and Eduardo and Doris at Rough Point. So she clapped her eyes on him. Now, he and Eduardo, he swore to me, they just were buddies. They were friends and they'd go cruising together, and et cetera, but they never, they weren't lovers at all. However, that's, Doris Duke didn't know that, or who knows what was in her head. When she saw him, I believe that might have been the piqued her jealousy. But in any case, nobody 2 times me. And then, and you add that to the fact that he just wanted to get away from her, and nobody left Doris Duke without consequences. Mm-hmm. So, I can't, again, I'm much more, my forensic research is impeccable. I can't really speculate on what was really in her mind, but jealousy is one of the most toxic and oldest motivations for homicide there is. So.
That's incredible. And then the way she took him out, it reminds me of Baby Jane. That scene in Baby Jane when she runs her sister over.
Did you actually read my book before you said that, or are you actually saying that? Because that is in my book.
I'm just saying that. See, I'm a good journalist.
Oh, wait a second, Charlotte, you rock. Okay, let me tell you what happened. After the incident in October of '66, Sheila Graham was a very famous columnist at the time, international columnist Sheila Graham. And I think it was sometime in the fall after this happened, she wrote a column, which is in my book. And she said, you know, what happened with Eduardo Torello was eerily similar to the plot of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Now, I hadn't seen that film since high school, since it came out in like 62. It was like 4 years before this incident, okay? And in the film, I'll refresh to whoever ends up watching this thing, the viewers, what happens is Betty Davis plays a young child star named Baby Jane. So it kind of flashes back to her, you know, career as a young, very famous child star. And then as she got older, she kind of lost her luster or whatever. And then her sister, played by Joan Crawford, was the big star, okay? In the way the movie opens. And Joan is fiercely jealous to this day, even though she's the star, she's very jealous of her sister. So they're driving home one night and Betty gets out to open the gates of what is described in the movie as the old Valentino place, Falcon Lair. I mean, what? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where Doris lived with it. That's where she stabbed, Joe Castro. So Sheila Graham kind of speculated, is it possible that Doris had seen that movie and maybe got an idea from it? And I thought to myself later, only after I'd seen the film again and looked at everything together, and you're very, very sensitive and omniscient for even saying this, I thought to myself, you know, this was obviously an accident, started as an accident, or maybe a manslaughter that veered out of control. Maybe she decided, you know, I don't want this guy to leave, so I'm just gonna, you know, tap him against the brakes. Maybe he'll break his leg, because in the movie, as you know, Betty Davis is crippled. She lives, she's in a wheelchair, and the rest of the movie is like a gothic horror movie where Betty Davis and Joan Crawford are old ladies now, and they're going at each other tooth and nail. Okay. So I thought to myself, and this is pure speculation, right? But I wondered, and now, you know, I said to myself, is it possible that Doris Duke thought, well, maybe I'll just, you know, do something to him to debilitate him in some way, where he's really has to stay with me now, okay? And then, but so let me tell you what really happened, if I may now, the crime that was solved. So what happened was, according to Sergeant Newton, but let me go back and talk about how I learned this first. There was a young officer that night. The first officer on the scene name was Edward Angel, Eddie Angel. Great name, right, for a cop to come onto a scene of an accident. And he's the cousin of a Linda Angel, who lived 2 blocks from me growing up, who I had a crush on in junior high. You know, it's a small town, Newport. So anyway, Eddie Angel had only been on the job a year, and he had the Bellevue Avenue beat, which is this street where it happened. She lived in this incredible estate at the end of Bellevue Avenue, and then Bellevue Avenue takes a 90-degree turn and becomes what's called the Ocean Drive. And there are all these amazing mansions, which they call summer cottages, around the drive. But she's got the incredible location right on the corner overlooking the Atlantic, and 10 acres, 30-room estate built by one of the Vanderbilts. Anyway, so Eddie Angel, when he hears what happens is a guy named Hanley is driving by, and he sees the car. When she went through the gates across Bellevue Avenue, which is 80 feet wide, she went up and with such force that the wagon basically blew through 20 feet of post and rail fence and ended up parallel to her estate up against a tree. So if you were going down Bellevue on your left-hand side, you'd see these gates blown open, and on the right, you just see a white Dodge Polara 1966 station wagon against the tree with the front end completely crumpled and kind of up like this. So this cop arrives, and Doris is still in the driver's seat, and he was a young rookie, and he looked and he saw that there was a body underneath the back, or maybe a living person. He didn't know, and he had no idea who the guy was. He knew this was probably a rich lady. I don't even know that he knew it was Doris Duke right away. And so he blurted out, he said, "Peter, I blurted out, there's a guy under there." And she just freaked out. She opened the door and started running back and forth, hysterical, in the Bellevue Avenue. And this young Navy nurse arrived, who had just been commissioned at the Newport Naval Base the day before. Her name was Judith Thom, Thom. Her father was a Milwaukee cop. and her mother, and they were going to drive back to Wisconsin the next day, and so they were going on a sightseeing tour around the Ocean Drive before it got dark. So Judith jumps out, and I interviewed her, and I tracked her down. Her name is Judith Tom Wartko. She had over 30 years as an EMS worker after she got out of the Navy. Incredible woman. And so Doris started running into the estate, and she followed her in and followed her out, etc. That's another part of the story. But Eddie Angel now is on the scene, and he's, he realizes this, like it was another cop said, he was like wrapped up around the axle. That's how he was instantly dead.
Ooh.
Massive damage to his upper body. He had a broken hip, but everything else below his waist was intact. His legs were not broken, etc. And that becomes an important clue in a little bit when I tell you ultimately what happened. But he was just destroyed. And so what Eddie Angel, after the world arrived, two rescue wagons, one took his body to Newport Hospital, another one took her to Newport Hospital. She was locked away that night in a private room. The medical examiner for Newport County, Dr. Philip McAllister, allowed himself to be hired by Doris as her private doctor, and he locked her in a private room so the state investigators could not get to her. I mean, come on, talk about a cover-up, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, so Eddie, after everybody has things have calmed down and the scene is relatively quiet, he decides he has to file a report, and he's going to kind of do a diagram of what he thinks happened. So he walks into the middle of Bellevue Avenue, or about a third of the way into Bellevue from where the gates blew out on the estate, across from where the ultimate crash was, and he sees skin and blood, Charlotte, in the street. Human remains. He sees blood and skin. There's no trail of blood or skin from the gates. He sees it in the middle of this, or pretty close to the middle of the street. So his theory was initially, well, she must have hit a pedestrian. She lost control of the vehicle. It blew through the gates, and this guy was maybe crossing the street and she hit him, because that was the POI, the point of impact, as he saw it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he writes that up. And now we go back to this guy, Fred Newton, the guy I mentioned that showed up in the picture, who I had done the article about months later, the following year. And so Fred Newton is the chief accident investigator. So when Eddie Angel files his report, the next day, Fred Angel, before he was about to go on duty at 5 o'clock again, Fred Newton says, "Hey, kid, you got it wrong. Meet me up there. I'll tell you what happened. You got it wrong." Thinking that she hit a pedestrian. So they meet up there, and now the chief had already announced, Charlotte, at that point, virtually the next day, the chief announced that she crushed Eduardo against the gate, that she somehow lost control of the vehicle. She crushed Eduardo against the gate, and then, basically, let me just see if I can fix the light a little bit here. I don't know if it makes any difference. Okay. And that ultimately, he was killed now. Okay. Well, what happened is the chief takes him up. They look at, the gates are inward now, but they can get in and look. There's not a bit of blood on the gates, nothing on the ground below the gates, nothing indicating that the car did any damage, that somehow a human being was crushed against the gates, like the chief said. So this is what Fred Newton's theory was. And it turns out that this is actually a phenomenon that happens many times. That there's an oncoming vehicle and people are looking at a car about to hit them, they will jump up on the hood of the car. They'll try and get up. If they can't go left or right to avoid it, they'll literally jump up on the hood. It's a syndrome. And I actually had all of my forensic evidence was examined by one of the top forensic and engineering firms in America. And the guy who did the analysis absolutely agreed about what Fred Newton is told Eddie, and I'm about to tell you happened. So his theory was that Eduardo walks over. They had a chain wrapped around the gates. It wasn't even locked. It was in the afternoon. He goes to open the gates. She slides over. Now, she makes 4 affirmative acts, intentional acts, before the car moves forward. 1, she slides over behind the wheel. 2, the car was in park with the parking brake on. So number 2, she had the parking brake release was on literally under the dash. So she had to release it intentionally with her hand. to release the brake. Then she puts the stick was on the wheel. It was a gear shift on the wheel, conventional. She shifts it into gear, and then by the way, the accelerator pedal was like vertical, and the brake was like this. And this is the way my hands look in proportion to each other. That's how big they were and how different they were. You could not mistake that. She later said, "Oh, I thought I was hitting the brake. My foot slipped onto the accelerator." Nobody could rationally do that. And when the Registry of Motor Vehicles guys tested the brake and everything the next day at the garage where they towed the truck, everything was in perfect working order. It was not a malfunction of the vehicle. So what happens is, according to Fred Newton, she roars forward. Eddie turns. He sees her in horror. He jumps up on the hood. Now he's staring at Doris, probably staring through the window, because the indication was that he had turned around, because he probably heard her for a second, because she left these gouge marks in the gravel. And he's up on the hood. She blows through the gates, all right, with him on the hood, but alive. And then, for unknown reasons, according to Fred Newton's theory, she taps the brakes, has a moment of hesitation, and he rolls off. He's now on the street. He's got a broken hip, but he's otherwise alive, and he's probably scared out of his mind. What is he saying? Doris, help me! What's going on? Right? Mm-hmm. And did she get out of the vehicle and, oh my God, Eduardo, let me call for the caretaker and scream and get the rescue wagon? No, she 1001, 1002, 1003. We don't know how many seconds went by. And she thought, in my opinion, she thought to herself, I can't get it in her head, but I'm just going to say, this is what I think she thought. I'm Doris Duke. I got away with the last thing with Joe Castro, and I'm going to get away with this one. And she just, wham, whether when she tapped the brake, she put it into park temporarily and then had to put it back into gear, or whether she just, had her foot on the brake, but she clearly, and then she crushed him to death. She roared this 2-ton wagon over him and dragged his body like 40 more feet, hit a curb. So he's hitting a curb as he's dragged under the vehicle. And then she blasts through 20 feet of post and rail fence and ends up at this tree. And the engineer that analyzed the case for me said it was a double sequence event. And I said, well, what's that mean? He said, oh, if it was a single sequence event, he probably would have lived. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, single sequence events is she roars forward, he jumps on the hood, he's holding onto the hood, she blows through the gates and just keeps going. And he get across the street by inertia of motion. He's kind of held on to he's probably gripping around as much as he can, the windshield. And then she hits, and he probably would have bounced off into the bushes across the street. He might have had more injuries, but he certainly would have not sustained the damage that he did. A double sequence event, which is what Fred Newton concluded, is that when she tapped the brakes, now this is a second sequence. Do you see what I mean? Right. And then she just crushes him to death. And ironically, the autopsy report had been missing for years, filed under the wrong name. I got that through Donna Lohmeyer, this remarkable woman who's the niece of Eduardo, who I was able to find. And she she'd been waiting for 50 years for somebody to tell the truth about her uncle. And she was turned into the best researcher I ever worked with in my entire career, including ABC News. She was amazing. And so she actually got that report from the state of Rhode Island. And then I got the police report through other means. But basically, there was a death certificate shortly thereafter that I also got. And in retrospect, and they're all in the book. All of these documents are in the book. If you're a forensic junkie, if you're a true crime junkie, homicide at Rough Point. See Peter Lance? Do I point here? See that little thing right there with my name? PeterLance.com.
I'm definitely going to read this book. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, you already guessed like a huge part of it with the Baby Jane reference. So anyway, and you have me back, after you've read it. Let's do
that. I'm all for it.
You know what? You can spend some time. We can get 50 people on the show at that point.
Absolutely.
Little boxes. But anyway, so the bottom line is she, basically the death certificate that I have in the book basically gives all of his injuries. And I got it early on in the investigation before I knew about Fred Newton's theory. And I thought, well, this is wild. I mean, he's got all these, upper body injuries. And then I got the 2 shots of the gate. I want to try and do this one more time without too much glare. Okay. You see that? I think that's pretty, visible. Those are the gates the next day closed in. And I have another shot by the same photographer named Jerry Taylor that show the gates in the morning, and you can see backlit, there's light behind them. And you can see that the only damage to the gates is from the waist down. The only damage to Eduardo is from the waist up. So she never could have crushed him against the gates, as the chief said. But by fact that the chief said that is part and parcel to the cover-up. Now, there's one other amazing thing that proves police corruption here. So I was talking to a lawyer in Newport named Bill O'Connell, whose older brother Jimmy I went to high school with, and his brother James O'Connell is a famous doctor who ministers to the poor, the street people of Boston. He's went to Harvard Medical School. He's internationally known. He's written books. He's an amazing guy. Just the #1 guy in my high school growing up, De La Salle. And his brother Bill's a lawyer, and I was talking to him because he had said something in the Facebook group, and he said, when I took the bar exam in Rhode Island, you take a course to prepare you for the bar, and the guy that was teaching the class on wrongful death suits, civil suits involving wrongful death, said, I'll tell you one thing, whatever you do, make sure you're going to represent somebody, some plaintiffs, that the victim had some earning capacity in the back end of their life post-mortem, because you'll never get any damages otherwise. And the case that he used as an example was what they called Torella et al., Alice Torella Romano versus Doris Duke. So Eddie Torella, they called him Eddie, and the family had 5 sisters, 3 brothers, and they all lived in New Jersey, upper middle class Italian Americans. And they asked Doris if she would settle for $600,000. No. Then they asked her, what about $200,000? No. This is when she's making $1 million a week in interest. Just refused to settle. And finally, they filed a $1.25 million wrongful death action, and it was dragged on and on for her lawyers for 5 years. Finally, in Providence, Rhode Island, the state capital, 5 years later in June, in the same courthouse where the Von Bulow, the second trial of Klaus Von Bulow, another infamous murder case in Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island, among the wealthy, had taken place. Doris was found civilly liable. So in the damage phase, the first part of the trial, it's a 2-phase trial. One, you are the jury decides whether you are liable for the death civilly, as in the OJ case. Remember, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit, or whatever. He got off on the criminal charges through Johnny Cochran, but the family of Brown and Goldman sued, and OJ was found liable, and he was on the hook for $70 million in damages, which he'll apparently never pay. In this case, she is found civilly liable for the wrongful death, but when they get to the damage phase, her lawyer, it was a guy named Aram Arabian. He was kind of the Roy Cohn of New England in those days. He was an unscrupulous lawyer. And he denigrated Eduardo to such a degree, make him look like a sycophant and a fool and a ne'er-do-well. And believe me, while the transcript of that case is missing, another thing that was cleansed later on, I have little doubt that he played the gay card in 1966. And if you were a gay man in Providence, Rhode Island, in front of an urban jury, you were half a man. And I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm just saying that was the prejudice of the day that permeated us for years and years until the gay rights movement began to change things. But nonetheless, so Eduardo's family, listen to this, when they finally did the damages, $75,000 was the total award. And even though he had 20 years of earning capacity, that year he earned $42,000 that year alone. So if you just do the math on how, and his Hollywood career was taking off. So they demonstrated all that. But nonetheless, her lawyer so denigrated him, this gay man, that the award was $75,000 plus interest. And when the lawyers took their cut, there were 5 lawyers, I think, representing the Torella family. Each brother and sister got $5,620. And when I heard that, I said, you know what? As bad as it was that she killed him, that was almost as bad. And so that is what, Charlotte, what drove me forward as I wrote this book to try and, tell the truth on behalf of Eduardo Torello. Incredible,
Absolutely fantastic. I have one couple last questions for you.
Sure.
Did anybody try to stop you from publishing this book?
No, but I'll tell you an interesting thing. Chapter 34. Now, again, I'm gonna ask people, if go to peterlance.com right now when you can, or whenever you watch this, and you'll see that if you scroll down right on the main page, you'll see an article, and we were like #1 yesterday on one of Amazon's bestseller lists. It's really great. And there's a link to chapter 34. The book has 35 chapters. I call chapter 34 The Cover-Up Continues. And it starts with none other than whatever happened to Baby Jane. There's the whole story we just did. It's got a picture from the movie of the car crashed against the gate of Falcon Lair, But the Newport Restoration Foundation, which Rough Point, this estate, just had its 20th anniversary as a home museum, okay? It supposedly looks exactly as Doris left it the last time she was there. She died in 1993 at the age of 80, so many years ago. And then they opened this Rough Point as a museum around the year 2000, okay? So they have a tour, it takes about an hour, and it's a fascinating place full of works of art that Eduardo Torello curated for her over the years. Priceless works of art. Never once in 20 years, from anything I could tell, interviewing former tour guides, etc., did anyone ever mention the name Eduardo Torello, because just as the photo was selectively removed, there's only one photo of Eduardo and Doris. I don't know if you can see this, but see that photo right there? That's Eduardo, that's Doris Duke. That photo has apparently been removed from Getty Images archive. I got a copy of it because it was in Stephanie Mansfield's book in 1992, I believe. And at the time, it was Bettman Archive. And then Bettman Archive was bought by Corbis. And then Corbis was absorbed by Getty Images. And they did a thorough, believe me, they would have liked to have charged for the use of that photo. They did a thorough investigation, could not find it. So that's the only image of Eduardo Torello and Doris Duke that's known together. So again, sanitize the record, right? His New York Times, her obituary in the New York Times, it ran 3/4 of a page, mentions him in one line. Her obituary in the LA Times, which is twice as long, he gets 2 lines, and they say that she was cleared in an inquest. There was no inquest. So the point is, she succeeded until now in erasing him. So to answer your question, no pushback when I was writing the book, because in the law of libel, or first of all, you cannot defame the dead, but let's just, defamation is the broad category. Slander is spoken defamation, and libel is printed or broadcast defamation. So if you say something that injures the reputation of an individual, and to a certain degree a corporation, they can bring a lawsuit, but this is the key: truth is an absolute defense. So this book has 60 pages of endnote annotations. I mean, it's meticulously, and believe me, and the book was reviewed by the same lawyer that did 3 of my HarperCollins books. It's meticulous in its research. So truth is an absolute defense. The other thing is that even if you make a mistake, if it involves a public figure or a public official, they have to prove what's called actual malice, that I knew it was wrong and I still published it. And just impossible, because I'm super careful with what I do. However, the Newport Restoration Foundation, I'm going to do a little show and tell here. It's probably not going to show up on camera, but I just urge everybody to get the book. First of all, this is a shot of from whatever happened to Baby Jane, okay? That's right there. Charlotte was way ahead of the curve on that one. And then, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but over the after they found out that I was doing, I kind of came out, if you will, on the Newport Facebook group in 2018, announcing that I was going to do this story. Okay, right? I should just turn off that other light. This is like so much better lighting right now. So anyway, Charlotte, this is an entire wall that was put up as an exhibit at Rough Point for not just 1 year, but 2 years after never mentioning him. And it lies. It says that they were going to dinner that night when we know they weren't. And at the very end of the thing, it says that the Torella family, Doris settled with them after a few days of trial. Absolutely untrue, a lie. And it's a lie, to me, in my opinion, that defames the Torella family who are still living today. So, so the Restoration Foundation has done that, but then they carry cover up to another level. What they do is, this is a shot of the gates, the top shot. That's how the gates look for 50 years. You see they're fully intact. The top shot was taken on the Ides of March 2 days ago in 2019. Then they had an accident. A catering truck hit the gates, and then they were split in half. So they took the gates down. That happened in November, and yet they never got the gates fixed. Now, you'd think it was the 20th anniversary that they were going to open in May 1st. Big year for the Rough Point Museum. Why not get the gates fixed? Well, this is what the gates look like now to this day. It's like a little fence that you'd see in a cow pasture. See that?
I was gonna say, yeah.
The August Rough Point estate, that's it. So the point is, what are the gates? They're evidence, right? Not that anybody could bring criminal charges, but the gates are evidence of Eduardo's death. And now here's the ultimate kick in the head. So just before we went to press in late November, right before they were going to lock down the estate for the winter, close it down, I asked the fellow to go in and take a shot. And I said, are the gates anywhere? And he found the gates hidden in the estate in the corner under a tarp. Okay. So those are the gates. That's that part. And then there's one other part that's wild. In the book, we talk about, one of the things I found out is, where were they going that night? The chief said they were going to dinner, which is on the wall. No, they were going to pick up this artifact right here. It's called the Reliquary of Saint Ursula. And anybody that's got any Catholic upbringing will know how weird Catholics are when it comes to relics. And I'm a former altar boy, so I can say that with authority. And the Catholic Church reveres relics or bones of saints. And this happened to be a very famous reliquary carved in the 15th century of Saint Ursula, who was one of the most famous saints in history. The Virgin Islands were named by Columbus because she was martyred with, the legend is that she was with 11,000 virgins who were killed by the Huns. Couldn't have been 11,000, but even if it was 11, it was too many. And so she was a martyr. And there's a little, in the chest of that work of art, there's a little, like, cavity with a little window, and you can see this bone. Okay. Well, after my pieces in Vanity Fair, where I talk about this, that was in July. In August, look at, they took the reliquary away. They got rid of the relic. Not only did they hide the gates, they hid the reliquary. Now, why would you do that? How ham-handed is that? Do you know what I'm trying to say? However, is it not in the tradition of Doris Duke, cleaning up afterwards? I mean, that's the ethic that she lived by, and that's what all her surviving minions seem to do. So this is an ongoing story. That's why I wrote a letter to the editor in a local paper last week about this. And I said, listen, so they channel a great guy named R.J. Heim, a reporter for WJAR, the NBC affiliate in Providence, and all of which is on peterlance.com. You can find it. There we go.
Over in the corner. Yeah,
there's a four-part series last week this guy did. It's like little mini 60 minutes if you add the whole thing together. And so he got a statement from the Restoration Foundation, and they said, I'm summarizing, but they said, we have neither the capacity, the capability, or something like that to investigate Peter Lance's findings. Now, what is a Restoration Foundation but a foundation dedicated to historical research and analysis. I mean, that's kind of like what they do. That's what they restored all these colonial houses. They maintain Rough Point. They have several other properties in Newport of historic significance. Now, so you say, well, do they have the money to do it? Guess what? They're worth $75 million, this restoration foundation. And I got their tax return, which I put, I have it on peterlance.com. I have a link for their nonprofit tax return. The top 5 executives last year were paid almost $750,000 collectively. So you're telling me that you don't have the ability to go into my book piece by piece and knock it down if you think there's something wrong and tell me about it? I'll change it if there's something you think I'm wrong about, but I'm not wrong. This book is truthful, and it restores the reputation of a gay man who was mercilessly killed and then had his legend mercilessly destroyed.
That's fabulous. I want to thank you. This hour blew by, I'll tell you.
Yeah, wow, we're done already. I can't, it's even more than an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so patient, friends.
We kept rolling right along. I want to get you back on, like you said. I really do. I'm gonna order this book tonight, and I'm gonna read through it, and I'm even gonna fix this video up a little more. I'm gonna take some of the photos out of the book and place them in there so we can show people and all that. And we'll
try and do, if you do that, at least give the credits for the photo credits. I'm very careful that the people.
I will do that. Yeah, as a journalist, absolutely.
Yeah, let's get as many people for the next program as possible, and just whatever you can do in your vast social media footprint, Charlotte.
Sure.
Because this was a labor of love. It would probably take me 2 years to break even on what this book cost, but it did so much of a benefit just to do it. So all right.
Absolutely. But thank you so much. And please do come back. I mean, like I said, we'll get together.
I hope Andrea hasn't fallen asleep behind the their name there. And Hui, thank you so much, Hui. I see you're into Toastmasters. One of my best friends, Lynn Cedarquist, who helped to proofread the book, is very big on Toastmasters International. So anyway, okay.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, okay. Well, shall I hit leave now?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Peter.
Send me a link now at Peter.
I shall.
It's my what do you call it? Is PL at peterlink.com. Charlotte will give it to you.
Forward to Sally.
We got
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it.
Lovely to talk with you. Thank you. Bye.
Anyway, guys, that was a great show, and we're going to get him on again because that book was, for what he says, the info in that book's absolutely fascinating. I can tell you, and I can agree with him and a lot in that.
Stop live.
Trying to get information out of the police is like pulling teeth, and I really admire him